Hello, buddy. Senior engineer, MBA, and investor. And in today's video, I want to talk about latest earnings from Airbnb, from Square, and I want to sort of introduce the earnings for tomorrow's video, which I will make about NTLA, which is obviously our dark horse in genomics, in genome editing space. But for today's video, I want to talk about Airbnb and Square. So before we dive deep into the earnings today for both of those companies, do like this video, smash that like button, destroy that like button. That's all I ask from you guys, besides also asking you guys to subscribe. If you can, really does help the channel. This community is just amazing. And if you have any comments, input, feedback, leave it in the comment below. We try to read and respond to every single comment out there. So obviously the past 2 weeks it's been earnings bonanza, right? Bunch of companies have posted earnings throughout the past 2 weeks, including the big tech. And obviously today we wanted and we were expecting the earnings from Airbnb and from Square. Now, Airbnb, I've covered this company in the past. I've actually mentioned that I believe that Brian Chesky is one of the most underrated CEOs, and I strongly believe he will be one of the top three CEOs coming forward in the upcoming decades. I think he's like 39 or he just became 40 this year. He still has many years under his plate. Uh, he has so much experience with Airbnb. He's founder-led, CEO, founder-led. Obviously, he has two other founders there, Nathan and the other person too that I'm slipping his name, but right now. But just know that he is one of those guys that you have to watch his interviews. Brian Chesky, fun fact, he was a bodybuilder when he was in college. If you just Google Brian Chesky bodybuilding career or something like that, you'll see him like at 19 years old, like all beefed up, juiced up. But again, another topic for another day, maybe. So Airbnb, they posted their results, and again, Airbnb is one of those companies that you want to follow. Again, we don't provide financial advice. We never tell you what to invest in. You have to take your own decisions, but ultimately we want to provide free information for you guys, free education. And I do believe that a lot of legacy media has sort of failed to cover Airbnb. And there are a couple of reasons that are there. I have my own hypotheses there. A lot of these quote unquote travel agencies or, these hotels and so on, they pay a lot, right, to legacy media, they pay a lot to journalists, newspapers, and so on, and that means obviously ads, right? That's how they get paid, these legacy media outlets and so on. Now the difference between Airbnb and all of the latter the companies that I mentioned is that Airbnb has a direct relationship with consumers, right? And 95% of their users going to airbnb.com or whatever the country is directly from the URL or through the app. This is huge, right? In travel, this is so huge, right? This is unheard of. In the travel industry, in tourist industry, you don't get that type of attraction, that type of branding power, right? And obviously the internet has changed everything. Airbnb as a company owns absolutely no real estate. Obviously they own obviously some assets here and there, but when I mean like their users itself, their hosts, they don't own their homes. What they do own is their platform, right? So they make their fees off their host, basically interacting with guests, right? They're basically their customers as well. So in a sense, Airbnb model, it's just like other gig models, right? Like Uber, DoorDash, and all those companies, right? Their business model is basically their customers are basically consumers, citizens, basically travelers, but also the host, right? The people that are giving up their home for a period of time to those travelers, right? So they're making fees both, and it's an amazing business model. Obviously, I've covered this company in the past. Do watch that video if you're curious. But what I wanted to talk about in this earning is their breaking news, right? Their breaking news that Q3 of 2021 was their highest revenue ever, up nearly 70% over year and surpassed Q3 level 2019 by 36%, demonstrating the strength of level of travel rebound in Airbnb. So obviously comparing it with year over year, it doesn't really tell us much. We were in the worst pandemic last year. We're still sort of in the worst pandemic, but I'm not even sure where we stand anymore. But if you compare with Q3 of 2019, that's a great comparison because 2019 was pre-pandemic, right? 2019, you didn't have any pandemic. There was full travel, people were traveling. And if they beat that record in that Q3, specifically Q3, you always have to look at quarters, especially in this business line. In tourism, it's up and down. You have seasonal business. You have to stay within your quarters. Q3 2019, 2 years later, almost at till near the tail end of the pandemic, if I may say, you're up 36% compared to that quarter 2 years ago. I think that's amazing. $2.2 billion revenue. That is just amazing. Net income just shy of 900 million, well, 834 million, right? Again, 8 Q3 2019 net income was our highest ever, driven by our significant top line revenue, a continued expand discipline, travel seasonality. Really important is the pandemic sort of allowed Airbnb to sort of cut and shave a lot of personnel. There was a lot of rumors, a lot of legacy media covering it because they will do anything to attack this company. And it is a fact, right? Airbnb laid off like 20 or to 25% of its workforce right when the pandemic hit. And I do want to give a shout out to Chesky, the CEO, how he handled it. Public apology, a public share letter to all employees. They also made a directory, employee directory, to help their employees that they laid off to search for jobs for future companies, which is it's amazing, right? And on top of the severances package that they gave to employees that basically got laid off during the worst pandemic, right? It is what it is. Look, it's a seasonality business. They're not, they don't own, uh, it's not like an airline, right? They can't get bailed out from governments, right? I know they try to get something from the Canadian government, but the Canadian government refused them. It is what it is. They had to lay off the people. But what's the good thing about this now is that, they're sort of operating right now under lean employee workforce. Anybody that's working in huge companies know exactly what I'm talking about. It's easy to hire people. It's even harder to fire them, right? Because of all the regulation, all the HR, all the paperwork. And plus, it's a lot of gray zone right now. You get into personality clashes, you get into, yeah, but the guy is one of the best developers, but he's basically an asshole to the team, right? So this is something you want to consider. And the fact that Airbnb was able to have that opportunity, it's like a blessing in disguise. Although I feel for the people that got laid off. I know a lot of people in Montreal got laid off from Airbnb, but it is what it is. And then a couple words from Brian Chesky here. Technologies like Zoom make it possible to work from home. Airbnb makes it possible to work from any home. This new found flexibility is bringing about a revolution in how we travel. So my couple of notes here, we could dive even deeper with the numbers here, but really my point here is that we're still at the tail end of the pandemic. Some countries are still under quote unquote lockdowns. Canada, provinces to provinces differ. I know in Quebec they're slowly opening up, literally, but in Ontario, you still have to limit some places. You still have to show several layers. You still have to book. I mean, for example, even in other provinces in Canada, I'm sure in your respective countries as well, um, it's you got to show your double vaccination to enter in some places. So just think of that, right? And again, this may not seem like a big deal, but it really is, right? The company just broke Q3 2019, went pre-pandemic, well before the pandemic, 36% in that quarter, despite being in the worst pandemic in the history of over the last 100 years, right? Many countries are still under some sort of lockdown or some sort of regulation that prevent people from traveling anywhere they want. You have to get your double vaccination, you have to get negative tests, and that's discouraging people. And the most important part is that companies are not even allowing people to travel, right? And that is causing these types of businesses like Airbnb to be affected, right? The tourism and the travel industry has been affected, make no mistake, right? But it's just quite astonishing that despite all those negative forces against this company, they were still able to hit over 30% of the Q3 levels in 2019 in terms of revenues, which is absolutely amazing. Basically, what it's telling me is that there are many people that are still not traveling, right? And don't forget, habits are very hard to change, right? We've been in this pandemic. I know time goes fast, but it's been well over a year and a half. We're approaching the second year mark. Trust me, after 24 months, it is very, very hard to change people's habits. A lot of people stayed home. A lot of people gave up on traveling. Although I know a lot of people, are back to traveling around the world. But the idea that, despite the worst pandemic and people habits being changed, they were still able to break records. I think that is just bullish for me. I can't believe, I just can't believe this. I think you definitely want to keep your eyes on this company. I think they are basically doing something that has never been done before, right? They are basically changing the game of the travel tourism industry. They're basically coming up to the population, to the public markets, and say, you know what? We just went through the worst pandemic and we're still sort of in it, but we're breaking records. And I think that's just beautiful to see. Shout out to all Airbnb employees, shareholders, and of course, my hats off to Brian Chesky, the CEO. I'm a huge fan of Chesky, as you may have noticed by the start of this video. Second company I wanted to talk about, this is just going to be briefly here. Square, obviously, Square posting the results. Square, obviously, led and founded by Jack Dorsey, who is also the CEO and founder of Twitter. And basically, Square bread and butter business is, the being like basically the liaison between small and medium sized businesses to consumers, citizens, right? I'm sure you've all gone to concerts or to local farm shops or local pop and mom shops, and they sort of pull up this big, well, it used to be big, now it's a lot smaller. Hardware where you could just pass your Visa card, your MasterCard, and that is basically the big white hardware. That's basically Square. And Square, obviously, they have an ecosystem. They call it the seller's ecosystem, and it's not just the hardware. They build, a beautiful dashboard. It has your software, it has your receipt, your payroll, everything. And obviously, Square makes some sort of subscription from those types of customers. And believe me, a lot of customers are signing up with a company like Square. Makes your life easier. Again, the fees are very low. And then there's the other side of the business from Square. Obviously, we've talked about in this channel as well, Cash App, which basically is another way of trading and selling stocks, but more specifically, buying and selling and holding Bitcoin, right? And obviously, it's still early on with the Bitcoin segment. It is an early story, but it's just beautiful what the company has been able to do. But most importantly, like third quarter 21, gross profit grew 40% year over year to 1.13 billion. That is just an enormous amount, guys. 43% year over year is just enormous for a company of this size. That is so great. I think, to me, I think I've always said that Square was one of those companies that can tie, for the first time ever, financial technology, fintech, and culture, lifestyle, fashion, culture, like the branding, right? You can see from these images, if you just take a look at just look at how they sort of brand themselves. Like you can see that they're sort of meddling into the lifestyle of people and the culture, the fashion. I just find it really interesting. It's never been done before. You've always, whenever you thought about like financials, even PayPal changed in the recent years, but up until like 2, 3 years ago, PayPal was seen as this boring company, right? This was part of eBay and it was just spun off from eBay. But all these companies with financial technologies, most of them, if not all of them, are completely boring, right? When you think about them, you're thinking about money and that's it. But Square was able to sort of do something that no other company has done before, which is enter in the fashion, in the culture, in the branding market. And I strongly think it's a competitive advantage for them. And their numbers don't lie. They're growing profits, they're growing gross payment from their sellers, and ultimately, for their Cash App, more users are coming on the platform. Um, to me, I think it's a beautiful story what's going on with Square. Again, led and founded by CEO right now, Jack Dorsey, who's a huge Bitcoin proponent, which we've obviously covered in his channel as well. And the last thing I wanted to go here is just charts, because you guys know I love charts. Look at this revenue from Airbnb. Look at the blue line. That is just huge, right? That is just huge, enormous. I love that. That's what you want to see quarter by quarter, just increasing. And it's just amazing how they were able to break records in spite still being in a pandemic for most countries. And again, you have to always consider the fact that people habits are going to take time to change, and it will take time for people to fully travel again. And imagine when they do, right? All the margin, higher margin, all the additional profits, all the additional users, all these hotels. There's to me the Airbnb story is the same story as Tesla, but in the hotel industry, in the travel industry. I foresee Airbnb doing a lot more than that, right? And I will refer to Square page. I don't think Hypercharts updated. Yeah, they didn't update it yet. Oh, yeah, they did actually. Take a look at the gross payment. Look at this, 45 billion, compared to the previous quarter, and revenue segment here decreasing, but this is because it's Q3, I'm assuming, right? And look at the revenue, operating income. Yeah, but there's a reason why the stock is sort of down a little bit um, after market. But again, Airbnb story, that's the one I really wanted to focus on for today's video. The Square was just an add-on there. Again, you guys know I'm a huge fan of both of these companies, but I'm also a huge fan of NTLA, which I will talk in tomorrow's video. I want to make a quick video on their earnings release this morning. So I wanted to keep this video for Airbnb and Square, and then talk about genomics, CRISPR company, obviously NTLA in tomorrow's video. So thank you so much for watching. Again, like this video if you found value, destroy that like button. If you have not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, and we will see each other tomorrow's video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a beautiful Thursday. Thank you.